And welcome again. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Mariane Asad Doyle. I serve as the Charlottesville Regional Chamber as a board member, as well as the chair of the Public Policy Committee. And we're so excited to have you all here. The committee itself, the Public Policy Committee, has enjoyed a really invigorating year this year. We serve the chamber membership by liaising with government officials and representatives, and we also evaluate policy that impacts business. And when necessary, we even take positions on policies on behalf of the chamber. We also lead two events for the chamber. One is the fall legislative breakfast, which we just had and was an incredible event. And we're looking forward to the spring state of the community as well. We hope that we will see you all there. We are delighted with the response that this information session has had, and we hope you'll find it incredibly helpful. The City of Charlottesville is now in the final stages of approving and enacting a generational change to its zoning code, and the Public Policy Committee and Chamber Board have been closely monitoring this change. We have not yet taken a position on the ordinance, but we are doing our best to continue from an educational perspective and continue learning. It is our hope that the new zoning ordinance accounts for making it easier to open and operate a business in Charlottesville from the perspective of what zoning impacts and controls. And part of that impact is the housing crunch. We hope that the new ordinance would increase the number of residential units available, diversify housing types, and positively impact housing affordability. We have to commend the process and hard work of all the individuals who have contributed to this effort for nearly 7 years. In 2017, the city began work on a new comprehensive plan, which included, among other things, a rewrite of the city's zoning ordinance, which has long limited the types of housing that can be built in the city. In fact, just last night, the Planning Commission recommended that the proposed zoning ordinance to the City Council, which marks significant progress on this work. The purpose of today's educational webinar for chamber members about the zoning ordinance is really twofold. And so first, it is to provide information to the business community about how the proposed zoning changes will potentially have an impact on their enterprises. And second, it is to seek feedback from you, our members, on the zoning changes. So before we begin, I want to share a little bit with all of you about the order of the day and also some logistics. First, we'll hear from James Freas, the Director of Neighborhood Development Services at the City of Charlottesville, and he will be providing a presentation with an overview of the zoning changes and specifically how they might impact the business community. Following him, we will hear insights from the Charlottesville Area Developmental Roundtable, or CADRe, the Chamber's Real Estate and Economic Development Roundtable. This will be provided by Ashley Davies, who is Chair of CADRe and also Vice President of Riverbend Development during the day job. Finally, we want to hear from you. We will move into questions and answers, which will be moderated by Neil Williamson, President of the Free Enterprise Forum. And you can submit comments and questions throughout the webinar using the chat function. We will then address them at the end during Neil's Q&A session. In terms of logistics, as you already know, the webinar will be recorded. The presentations will be shared with all of you who cannot attend and all of you who have attended if you wanted to look back at it. The Q&A session will not be shared. Again, please remember to put your questions, your comments, everything you want to share in the chat, because we won't be able to answer them until that Q&A session. And with that, I want to welcome James Freas, who will be kicking us off.
All right, thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. So as was noted last night, big night for this project. The Planning Commission voted their recommendation to City Council. They've made a number of tweaks to the draft document that they received a number of weeks ago, and those are captured within the resolution that they're passing on to Council. And the next step for Council going forward will be to advertise a new draft of the zoning ordinance and then conduct their own public hearing. So the next big opportunity for comment on this will be the City Council's public hearing, which they'll be scheduling, I believe, next week. So looking forward to hearing what date that is coming up for and continuing conversation with City Council. I should note, I guess maybe be appropriate for me to do a quick introduction of myself, since I'm sure a lot of people here don't know who I am. So as a note, my name is James Freas. I've been with the city since September of 21, so just cleared my two-year mark. Before working for the City of Charlottesville, I spent just over 12 years in the Boston area working for a number of communities up there. But I'm originally from Northern Virginia, and I did my undergraduate at UVA here in Charlottesville. And my folks have moved here about 20 years ago, so I've been continuing to stay abreast of the activities in the city in the time that I was gone. For education, I have both a master's degree in community planning as well as a master's degree in environmental law, where I focused in land use law, hence my work throughout my career in zoning rewrites. This is my second major one for a community, and I've done a lot of zoning work over my time in the field. So I'm going to share my screen and get started. All right. Okay. Trust everyone can see that. Someone give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Thank you, Natalie. All right. So as was noted, we're reaching kind of the end point of what has been a long process over a number of years. The original update to the comprehensive plan began way back in 2017 and progressed forward through to 2021, where we actually had the adoption of both an affordable housing plan and the comprehensive plan in November of that year. Now, we know a lot happened over the course of this time period. Very significantly, at the beginning of this process, in August of 2017, we saw the Unite the Right rally, which had a major influence on the outcome of this work. And then in 2020, we had the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, both of which influenced both the process of how we conducted this work, as well as, again, reinforcing the importance of the issues that were being addressed in this project. Now, one of the major issues, in related to this work was the issue of housing supply. And that's strongly connected to the issue of racial equity and how land use and zoning have shaped the equity landscape of the city over the course of the last many decades. This slide is from a study from 2015 that looked at the issue of supply and demand in the city, and in particular noted that undersupplies at both the most affordable level of housing, the less than 30% of AMI, that's area median income. So those housing units affordable to people at the lowest income levels, and then a significant undersupply at the upper income levels, again, back in 2015. And the end result of that is that at the lowest level, you end up with people who are either unable to find a place to live and therefore become part of our unhoused population, or there are people who are paying significantly more than they can afford according to general standards of what one can afford. So generally, the federal government, through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, suggests that a household should pay no more than 30% of their income towards housing costs, and that is what's considered the kind of affordability mark. But we find that many people, because of this undersupply, are paying substantially more. The thing you see at the other end of that market is that the wealthiest people who live in our community basically get to choose any housing unit they want effectively, right? Any housing unit they can afford, but they can afford the fullest range of housing units available. And so they exert pressure from the other direction and occupy the otherwise more affordable units that might go towards middle or even lower income households. And you see that most readily in the flipping of housing stock, where formerly lower value homes are refurbished, redeveloped, and become higher value homes. So we're seeing both of those trends even still today within the city. A later study from 2018 looked in particular, dug deeper into this question of the undersupply of affordable units and projected that forward to 2040 and identified a need for more than 3,000 units on the rental side. I'm sorry, more than 4,000 units on the rental side by 2040 in order to keep up with the demand just for affordable units. More recent data looking at our area median income, and this is looking at the whole region, has crept up from 2017 when the median income, so that's the midpoint of income, household incomes within our region, was around 76,000, just over 76,000. It's been creeping steadily up, but if you look at 2021, it's begun a pretty substantial increase. Last year it's up to 111, and now the data most recently for this year came out in July is 123. So that's saying that half the households in our region have an income of greater than 123,000 and half lower. So again, that really shapes the landscape of what this comprehensive plan and ultimately what the zoning ordinance is attempting to address. This slide here has a quote from the Weldon Cooper Center, Hamilton Lombard, basically looking at this issue of where there's opportunity for development, where development is occurring in Charlottesville, our population grows. Where development is not occurring in the city, that development is going out. And in this quote, he's noting Albemarle County, but in a recent presentation he gave to council, he's really expanded that to say, when Charlottesville isn't accommodating growth, that growth is going out not just to Albemarle County, but to surrounding counties beyond, as far as Waynesboro and Stanton on the other side of the mountain, to Louisa and Richmond to our east. That's a significant issue, and I think that's an issue that many of you probably also deal with. When we think about the distance that people have to commute, that's a major contributor to the congestion we see on our streets. Because congestion is not just a product of the number of cars, it's also a product of the amount, the distances those cars are traveling, the amount of time the amount of opportunity they have to contribute to congestion. And the farther that cars are traveling, the less opportunity those households have to take advantage of other modes of transportation, and the more expensive, the higher the cost that commute becomes. Yeah, I'm sorry, that was it on that. So the other thing I wanted to note coming out of the presentation that the Weldon Cooper provided for council last week, that I think struck many members of both council and other people watching, was couple statistics. One, that the Charlottesville area, the greater Charlottesville region, has grown by about the size of the city of Charlottesville every 20 years. And that's a pretty robust and consistent growth rate. A lot of that growth, as has been noted, has been spread out across a wider and wider area over time. The other thing that he noted was that Northern Virginia is now the most expensive housing market on the East Coast. And that's significant because Charlottesville is increasingly finding ourselves within that, within the orbit of what is a commute shed for Northern Virginia, particularly when you take into account the opportunity for remote work. And remote work has had a significant impact on growth within our region. The other statistic that he shared, which was also pretty significant, is that when you take into account the incomes in our region and compare that to our housing costs, Charlottesville, in fact, becomes the most expensive region on the East Coast. So I've heard the phrase a number of times, and I think the data that Weldon Cooper is referring to reinforces this. It's the idea that Charlottesville has Northern Virginia housing costs and Central Virginia incomes. And that all of that together kind of speaks to the challenge that we're facing and what we're trying to address by looking at the housing supply that the city can provide. So ultimately, the challenge that we were looking at was how do we promote the creation of more affordable housing, particularly at the lowest income levels, and how do we create opportunities for a range of housing choices in all neighborhoods of the city? And all of that is brought together into the Seville Plans Together process, which was, again, an affordable housing plan adopted in 2021, this comprehensive plan also adopted in 2021, and now the zoning ordinance that we're working to complete now. So just noting on the affordable housing plan, there's three major components to that. One of those obviously is to adopt changes to our zoning ordinance, which we'll come back to, but it's also important to remember that it also included dedicating $10 million annually to the production of affordable housing. And that's money that we provide to nonprofit affordable housing developers, and they leverage those funds with state and federal money to produce many of the projects that we see going up around the city. And then also building inclusive governance is basically referring to the notion of ensuring that the people who are taking advantage of or making use of the affordable housing that we're producing are involved in the decision-making processes about the allocation of those affordable housing funds. So there's a lot in the comprehensive plan. I'm not going to go into every bit of it, but the comprehensive plan is our guiding document for the production of the zoning ordinance. It sets the stage of what the zoning ordinance is attempting to accomplish. And it speaks to things like obviously creating additional housing, putting development near community hubs and amenities, taking advantage of vacant underutilized lands, focusing on walkability and bikeability as major aspects of that, and looking at protecting our historic resources and the long-term sustainability of the city. That comprehensive plan process resulted in a future land use map that took those ideas, those principles, and applied them geographically to the city. That included, in particular, a general residential area that would allow for more units on every lot within the city, and also allow for a mixture of uses. So everything from single family to small multifamily and limited commercial uses. And then the same in a medium intensity districts, which were oriented towards those community amenities, schools, parks, commercial areas, what have you, and a slightly more dense, sorry, I'm going to wait for the bus to go by. All right, in a more dense housing format. Now, when the comprehensive plan was adopted, medium intensity was envisioned as allowing as many as 12 units per lot. We'll come back to that note in a minute when we get to the zoning ordinance. So the land use chapter of the comprehensive plan, again, identified the objectives for the zoning ordinance. They're all listed here and are many of the things that I highlighted previously. So then we get to the zoning rewrite, and on top of the housing creation is recognizing all those other goals that I listed. How do we achieve those goals of walkability, economic sustainability, historic preservation, and so on, at the same time as achieving these goals of producing housing choice and more affordable housing. One of the things that's also important about the zoning ordinance is how it's the intention here is to make it a much more readily usable document that someone can pick up this ordinance and figure out what can happen on their property, what can happen on the property down the end of the street. The ordinance makes use of a great deal of it's well organized. B, it has illustrations and then tables that bring information together into easy to read formats. So the creation of the zoning ordinance began, as I noted, with the future land use map. those were translated into zoning districts. We used other tools like the Streets That Work plan to further interpret the ideas embodied within the comprehensive plan into the creation of zoning districts. And the end result was a new proposed zoning map. So there's a number of, so then there's a lot of districts that then arise from that land use map. The residential zoning category encompasses the lowest intensity uses, the residential A, B, and C. Residential, all of these allow some degree of commercial use. The residential A is the lowest intensity district and allows up to 3 units by right, 4 with the preservation of the existing structure, and up to 6 with the incorporation of affordable housing units. All the bonus units in those instances have to be affordable. The residential B allows up to 6 units and by right, and the residential C allows up to 8 units by right. And this is the point where I wanted to highlight that one of the decisions that was made as we were moving from the comprehensive plan to drafting the ordinance is to step back from that 12 units per lot that was envisioned within the comprehensive plan and bring that down to 6 and 8 in these districts, and then only allow bonuses to get you up higher in the residential C. Bonuses for affordability can then get you up to those 12 units. Residential mixed use category is a higher intensity district. It's more of a traditional multifamily apartment district. These districts and those following rely on height to differentiate the different districts. The mixed use RX3 allows up to 3 stories. The RX5 allows up to 5 stories. There is again a commercial component in here, but it's limited as to the proportion of any given building that can be devoted to commercial uses. So the predominant use is residential. Corridor mixed use moves into a more traditional mixed use category, obviously as per the name, aimed at our commercial corridors, allows residential uses, allows commercial uses as well. These could be office buildings as well as mixed use commercial buildings. I'm sorry, mixed use residential buildings. And then we have the node mixed use category. These are the only districts that come close to the idea of actually requiring a ground floor commercial use. We are not requiring a ground floor commercial use, but we are requiring that the ground floors in these nodes be commercial ready. So these are areas like downtown or other significant kind of potential commercial centers that where we want to make sure that the opportunity for ground floor retail and similar uses is available. And then our industrial zone is as the others are, governed by height, 5 and 8. Does allow residential uses as well, but the predominant use is going to be light industrial and those types of commercial uses. And then just briefly to special zoning categories, the campus, which is for large single use uses like schools, obviously the university, hospital campus would also fall into this, and then civic is for governmental uses, city parks, schools, and other city buildings. These overlay districts are all of our existing ones, our various historic districts, as well as the floodplain district. These are all largely existing districts. These are largely the same as presented in the existing zoning ordinance. And then getting down to what the Planning Commission voted on last night, there are 2 new districts proposed as part of the Planning Commission's recommendation. The residential core neighborhood, which is really looking at neighborhoods within kind of the core of the city that have traditionally served as providing housing for providing relatively affordable workforce housing, serving downtown and the university. And similarly, the core neighborhoods corridor overlay is an overlay district for those corridors adjacent to those same neighborhoods. In the residential core neighborhoods, the density is stepped back slightly, both in terms of the scale of buildings that can be built and the density of those buildings, with the intention of kind of reducing the redevelopment pressure on these neighborhoods while we work on the city's anti-displacement plans. Basically with the goal of ensuring that the future of these neighborhoods continues to be neighborhoods that can provide affordable housing in kind of diverse, in a diverse environment. And the core neighborhood similarly creates a special exemption process for the incorporation into projects and these are targeted towards Preston Avenue and Cherry Avenue, to incorporate community serving amenities into those projects for the future to support, again, those core neighborhoods of the city. So there's obviously much more to the zoning ordinance than just the districts. There's also what uses are allowed in each district. We have incorporated a new use table that we hope is much more easily used. And significantly, we have both the use definitions and use standards. One of the things we've done with the use definitions is we've made it easier to accommodate new uses into the zoning ordinance. So you'll see that rather than relying on a list of strictly specific uses, we've broadened it out to use categories and then created this section that defines here's how the zoning administrator is intended to review a potential use and identify what use category to put it in so that we understand what, where it's allowed and what standards might be applied to it. This gives us more flexibility and makes it easier to address those kind of novel uses that are showing up more frequently. So this should reduce the friction that one might experience in moving into new space and determining whether the use that is proposed is allowed within that space. The other big one other big change within the zoning ordinance is the affordable dwelling unit requirements, ADU requirements, more commonly referred to as inclusionary zoning, but under Virginia law, we refer to them as affordable dwelling unit requirements. Some folks may recall that back in the summer of 21, the city got a legislative change that allowed us to use a more robust ADU, affordable dwelling unit ordinance. The ordinance that is included in the draft that Planning Commission approved last night requires that projects that are of 10 or more units of housing, that at least 10% of the units in such projects are affordable to a household at or below 60% of AMI. So this is a base requirement. This is different from our existing zoning ordinance where this requirement only applies where there is a special use permit or similar discretionary permit. This applies to any project meeting those standards. And in addition, there's some bonuses, as I've referenced in the residential districts. There's bonus density available for affordable units where all of the bonus units are in fact affordable. And then in all other districts, if there's 2 additional floors, I'm sorry, if the affordable units are made are taken to a deeper level of affordability, so to 50% of AMI or below, a developer can qualify for 2 additional floors of units. Another big change within the zoning ordinance is the elimination of minimum car parking requirements. This is something that we're seeing throughout the country. Most recently, both Richmond and Roanoke have adopted the same standard. And it does a number of things, but one of those things it does is it makes it easier to move a commercial enterprise into an existing building. You don't have to worry about whether you can meet a minimum parking requirement. You're able to go right in. However, we do recognize that larger projects are still have potential transportation impacts that we need to address, and therefore projects over 50,000 square feet in size have to provide a transportation demand management plan along with their application that demonstrates how they're going to address issues of parking and transportation as they relate to their project. And then finally, all projects do still have a minimum bike parking requirement. Then there's a couple changes I wanted to highlight within the administration of the ordinance. One is the development review process, where we're spelling out a development plan phase, which is really a check on zoning, that a plan meets all the zoning requirements. This is meant to be a relatively simple and quick review, but provides us an opportunity to discuss the plan, a development plan at a conceptual level, and talk about all the different opportunities where various forms of waivers and administrative variances might be applied in order to address issues relative to the site or similar, and I'll come back to that. But it's a conceptual level plan review. Then we move into the standard engineering reviews, stormwater, utilities, and public infrastructure. And then all of those come together in a final site plan. Now, as today, one could skip straight to the final site plan and simply submit that as well. But we do believe there'll be a great deal of benefit in that initial development plan approach as both a lower cost plan submittal, but one that offers vesting as well. And then, as I was referencing, as far as modifying the requirements of the zoning ordinance, there's a number of different approaches. First, there's the administrative modifications. So that allow for most of the kind of physical dimensional requirements of the ordinance. You can get an up to 15% administrative modification. And then if that's not sufficient, there is a special exception process included, which is a process that goes through Planning Commission and City Council, but does not include a public hearing. And then finally, there's a variance where there's a hardship on the land, which of course is not terribly uncommon here in Charlottesville, given our topography. And that is a brief overview of a lot of what's in the zoning ordinance. Of course, there's a lot more to it, and I'm more than happy to answer questions beyond what's presented. So
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you taking the time today, James. This is so critical and important, and appreciate the comprehensiveness of your overview. Thank you very much.
Sure.
We're going to transition over to Ashley Davies. And again, Ashley is here to represent as chair of CADRe, which is a committee at the chamber. We're looking forward to hearing from her from that perspective. And then once again, if you haven't already, please be popping your questions and your comments into the chat. And both James and Ashley will be able to, all of us will be able to answer questions, and Neil will be moderating. With that, Ashley, would you like to kick off?
Sure.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So good to be here. And yes, just very excited about where we are in this overall process. Our group, CADRe, was formed, I believe, about 8 years ago. So we have been tracking this the whole way through. We are a group of real estate professionals. So think of lawyers, planners, engineers, designers, and our overarching purpose is to create Charlottesville's next great places. So we do that through working with the city and the county on any of the policy issues going on. We work to try to improve the entitlement and approvals process to make it very straightforward and expedited, and just building relationships with the various localities. And yes, so back in 2017, we actually did a full audit of the zoning ordinance at that time. So we have been working very closely all along on this process. I was actually zoning administrator for the city back in the day when the current code was adopted back in 2003. So been working with the current code for 20 years now, and so have seen kind of the highs and lows of what we have at the moment. And I was also a part of the steering committee for the Seville plans together, both on the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. So it's been really great to see this process underway. And I think everybody is certainly ready to get to a finished product so we can start dealing with these major housing issues that we see in Charlottesville. So today I thought I would just spend a little bit of time focusing more on kind of the business side of this. James did an excellent job really focusing on the housing emphasis. But, you know, one of the things that I noticed and noted as I was in the steering committee, because we are so housing focused, I don't think that this process has had a lot of conversation around the business side or economic development in the city of Charlottesville. And so I've brought that up several times along the way. And so I was just trying to look at the current code under that perspective. And a few of the things that were really highlighted for me is that when you have a brand new zoning ordinance that is really, this is so comprehensive. So it's changing the zoning of every single property in the entire city. And one of the things that does is you're going to see that almost every single property and the buildings on those properties become non-conforming structures. And so that is one main concern of mine, is that if we're coming at it from that perspective, that's a very specific section of the code that limits kind of how you can use those properties and how you can expand them and without having to fully comply with the new code. So I'm kind of thinking of things, if I were a business owner moving into a space, needing to expand, how would the code interact with that? How would it support me or hinder my use of that property? So that was one thing that I was thinking about. Maybe at the end of this, James and I could talk about a little bit about that with the group. But so that's one thing to think about. And there are very specific provisions in the code that address what you can do and what you cannot do. And then our group specifically, we spent a lot of time looking at the form-based code elements of the new zoning ordinance. And it is a very design-based code. We did have some form-based elements in the existing code, but this definitely does ramp it up to a new level with a lot more requirements. And as somebody who studied urban planning, I'm appreciative of that and the placemaking component of that, and how we'll have really nice pedestrian-oriented streetscapes. There are a lot of benefits to that, but if I'm thinking of it purely from a business standpoint, I think that it will certainly mean that you know, there's the potential for buildings to be more costly to build, more windows and transparencies and details needed. So I'm just, purely taking that perspective today. So that's something to think about. We were also focused on, there's one component of the ordinance that's called active depth, and that requires a certain amount of space within the building to have an active use. And so depending on, you know, certain types of uses, or if people are on a corner lot, or if people are trying to create parking decks and that sort of thing, that could be problematic for certain types of businesses. So yeah, those are kind of three major things that we thought about. And I think just the other one is, and I know this has been brought up in some of the work sessions with the city, just thinking about, you know, is property going to be more expensive to purchase and more expensive to build on? So that's I think the bulk of our concerns as they relate directly to businesses. And yeah, I think that many people from our group have been doing some test sites to see, okay, you know, what happens when you start overlaying all these pieces. But, you know, I think from an overarching perspective, we're at the point where, you know, we need to get this ordinance passed and we need to work with it and see, you know, every zoning ordinance is going to have its kinks. And as James has said many times, the zoning ordinance is a living document. So even when City Council does pass this document, it's my understanding that we'll be revisiting it often. And if there are, you know, major issues that need to be addressed, that will be a part of those future conversations. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashley.